right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. I'm very, very excited about this one. If you know a colleague looking for creative ways to get more value from every event, please send them a quick message to join us live. We are going to jump right in. Sales teams expect more pipeline from events, and leaderships wants clear proof that sponsorships are driving real business value. And at the same time, events themselves are evolving. Organizers are experimenting with new formats, creative activations, and year round engagement models. So, today we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about how brand marketers can take advantage of those changes to get more value from the events they invest in. If we haven't met before, hello, my name is Letitia. I'm on the events partnerships team here at Vendolux. Event ROI has historically been hard to prove. So, Vendolux changes that. We connect directly to your CRM and match your ICP against our database of over 250,000 B2B events. So you know exactly where your buyers would be. You can book qualified meetings before the event starts and tie every event investment back to real pipeline. And that's only possible because of the organizer partnerships that we've built. Leading events like Health, Commerce Next, Cyber Risk Alliance, and the Western Veterinary Conference partner with us so you get better intelligence and they get the tools to attract the right attendees and deliver a stronger ROI for their sponsors. So I'm very excited to be joined today by Sarah Taylor, Director of Conference Operations at Viticus Group. She works closely with sponsors for the Western Veterinary Conference, one of the largest veterinary events in the world. So she sees firsthand what separates a forgettable sponsorship from one that truly resonates, and she's got a lot to share with us today. So I'm very excited. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah.
Thank you, Letitia. I'm so excited to be here, and hi to everyone that's joined. Thank you guys all for being here. We definitely recommend questions, and hopefully we can answer all your questions because we do want you guys to be able to get the most out of this conversation.
Absolutely. Perfect. So let's just jump right in with what drives ROI at events today. So from your perspective, you know, you're working with sponsors every day. What separates the brands that see real results from those that don't?
That's a really good question. Um, so one of the things that I think the brands that see the real results, they come with a goal in mind, right? Clear goals, not just brand awareness, right? Like how do they want the audience to feel about their brand? And not only just the audience, but but who, right? What's the defined audience that they're looking for? And as a show organizer, we do our best to provide as many different demographics as we can. So that they can figure out who is there within our, grand audience of, 20,000 people at our conference, who do they want to target and what do they want those people to feel? And then designing an experience around that. Some of the brands that struggle, I think they don't necessarily have a strategy for that engagement. And they expect to show up right with their booth and maybe a banner, but no, not really activating it,
Right.
or asking, how do we create value for the audience? I think,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So like keyword activation, how do we activate the value, how we extract the value and deliver value at the same time, but activate. I feel like that's the key word there.
I would agree with that.
So if we think about how things are changing and sponsors are, obviously they're asking for different things today than they were asking for a few years ago. What would you say is different or what has changed recently?
Um, they're definitely, we see a lot more sponsors focused on an outcome rather than just brand exposure.
Yeah.
They want measurable ROI, right? And metrics, how many people have interacted with their brand and, how did those people come away feeling about the brand? They really want those insights. It's not necessarily just about numbers for them,
Right.
right? They want to know, what did the audience take away?
And it sounds like there's a responsibility just from these first two questions. It sounds like there's a responsibility on both sides. There's a responsibility from the brand's perspective to have a goal because they have expectations. So in order to reach those expectations, they need to have like a set goal as far as the sponsors who are having the most success. And then on the other side, it seems like there's another bucket from your perspective of helping them activate that value and figure out how they can get the most, how they can segment the audience, and really reach the goals that they have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we do encourage our sponsors to, tell us what your goals are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't just, go to our prospectus and order off the menu. You know what I mean? Tell us,
Yeah.
what like I said earlier, who are you wanting to engage? What do you want them to feel, right? Is this something, is it ongoing, right? Like, I think, maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but not just right in that moment at the conference, right? It's
Right.
like it's the story of your brand year round. And we are very open to working with our sponsors. I don't, I can't necessarily say the same for all show organizers, but I would say
Mm-hmm.
as a sponsor, you could at least ask the question. Say, hey, like I noticed you have this activation, but maybe could we add this or could we tweak this to make it more relevant to what, to our brand or to the product that we're launching? Or can I create my own sponsorship? Hey, like,
Mm-hmm.
none of the things on your menu align with what, the story that I want to tell about my brand. Can we just rent some space from you and can we, bring it in and do it ourselves? I would say it doesn't hurt to ask. And
Absolutely.
hopefully the show organizers will be open to working with you on those things.
And so let's say they do put something together themselves. Maybe there's an activation that they've done in the past that has worked well, or something that they've seen from someone else. This is, I guess, a kind of a personal curiosity, but how would they measure the success of that? Because they're creating it themselves, do they need to have their own success metrics, or is that something that you would have a conversation with them at the start to maybe pull in your experience to say these are some things that we can look for in terms of KPI to help you determine if you got ROI from this?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say we're definitely willing to help. But again, they need to kind of tell us right?
Yeah.
What are their KPIs, right? What
Mm-hmm.
do they want to measure and how? And, we can work with them from that. But I think if they don't necessarily have a clear strategy, right, or end game in mind, then it's hard for us. Like we can give them what our standard are, right? Our standard KPIs and measurement
Mm-hmm.
tools. But I don't, if that doesn't align with what they're doing, that may or may not be beneficial to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's probably like a little bit of a fear, like when you choose to do something on your own and you create something brand new, it's like it's all on you. So the brand marketer might be thinking, okay, maybe I'll adjust some things that are on the menu rather than build something brand new. But this conversation is all about getting creative. So hopefully, as we continue to go on, I know you've got some really good examples of brands who have created something out of the box or done something different. And so I'm excited to chat more about that. But before we get there, just kind of closing out this conversation on ROI, when a sponsor says this event worked for them, what actually happened? Like, what was it that made it successful for them?
Oh, well, there's a lot of things. So, one of the things I would say is they connected, right? They connected with an audience, and not just the whole audience, right? But the right audience for them. So I would say they made meaningful connections. They had good conversations, and or good leads, right? To then follow up on. Um, I would say their brand showed up in a way that felt helpful or valuable to
Okay.
the attendees. Um, and also something that, again, that carried beyond just the moment of the conference, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was, they engaged prior to the show, they engaged during the show, and then they continued that story after the show. I think that really that's the best way to do it because then people are going to remember your brand, right? It's not just a one and done. It's keeping your brand top of mind throughout the year.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk more about that. So we have a segment where we're going to talk about getting the most from your event budget. But I want to lean us into this next segment, which is how to create sponsor experiences that engage. Because you do have a specific activation that we've chatted about already that you mentioned. It really resonated with attendees. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? And hopefully the brand marketers that are listening can take this and adapt it to their company and think of ways that they can get creative. So please share that with
Yeah.
us.
This is one I'm so passionate about. It's such a great story. So it's an activation at our conference. So the first year we did it, it was one we were putting on. We as conference organizers, we said, we want a space where attendees can go to kind of relax, get away from the crazy, noise and excitement around conference. We called it the Zen. And we did a really nice, pretty area that was very calming and serene. We had floor pillows and plants and all that kind of stuff. We kind of tried to touch all the five senses with it. And we had experiences throughout the day, such as sound baths and sage stick making, very, very calm and serene. Nothing new, right? I'm sure everyone has seen an activation like that at a conference. But it was the first time we had done that, at least in recent years, since I've been with the show, which is 5 years. So funny. We called it the Zen Garden or the Zen Den. And we were meeting with a sponsor about a month before the show, talking about their goals and whatnot. And it just so happened they were launching a product that started with the name Zen. I wish I could say that was on purpose, that we knew they were doing,
Right. That would
but
be
we
very
didn't.
strategic if so.
Yes, it was definitely a coincidence. And they were like, oh my God, we have to do it. Like, yes, we have to have it. Like, our product name starts with Zen. So they sponsored it for that year. And they sponsored it as we had it. They added a couple little things, like some giveaways and some things like that. But for the most part, they sponsored it as we did it. So then the next year they said, okay, this product is really big for us. We're going bigger with it. Can we kind of just take it over? And we said, sure, go for it. They pitched us their ideas and we really liked it. We felt like it really aligned with what we wanted the Zen Den to be. So they renamed it to the Zen Garden, and it went from about a 20 by 40 space to like a 40 by 70 space on the show floor. So almost like a booth. But we treated it as an activation. And it was incredible. I mean, they had a digital waterfall. They had this beautiful like hut that they did like yoga and those type of activities. They had a maker station. I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And so it looked like something I was like, oh my God, can I put this in my backyard? It's just like an oasis on the show
Yeah.
floor is the best way to describe it. And so that was a great way of how, right, they took what we were doing and they expanded on it and they made it their own, right? They made it what their brand needed it to be. And that space just gets incredible traffic. They've done it now for 2 years as their own, plus the 1 year that we did it. And the traffic doesn't cease. And they touch all the five senses, kind of like I said earlier, right? They have a maker station where you can touch. They have the sound baths. They have kind of a soundtrack going, right? Of like, Zen sounds. They do fog, kind of like haze and fog. Obviously they have food and beverage. So I think it really solved that problem of, attendees didn't have kind of a quiet, safe space to go if they were overstimulated. And I think that's one of the reasons that activation is so popular and continues to be.
Nice. So one of if I'm taking notes right now, I'm thinking activate the five senses. Think of potential activations that tie into launches, whether it's product launches or things that we're trying to push forward, and hopefully coordinate with the organizer early to see if there's maybe something that's already being put together that we can adjust or accommodate. our ideas into. And
Hmm.
when you share that and you talk a little bit more about how there's a lot of foot traffic and the attendees enjoy it, I know that there's always a balance between what the sponsors are looking to get out of the event, what the organizer is trying to provide, because they need to provide an experience for attendees as well as the sponsor exhibitors. And so, what makes an activation, in your opinion, feel meaningful to attendees instead of just another branded moment? Because the Zen Den, now Zen Garden, could have gone, you know, either way. So, what do you feel is what makes something like that meaningful?
I would say creating a memorable emotional association, because when you walk into that space, I mean, even me as the event organizer, right, as I see all these different things and I saw it on paper and I knew, but even when I walk into that space, you feel something, whether it's a sense of calm or wow, or oh my gosh, I want to be here. That makes a huge difference, because people remember how they feel, and then that in turn creates that association in their brain. When they see your brand later, they're going to associate that feeling with your brand.
Absolutely. And I know that I'm sure there's some thoughts going on about budget, like, do I have the budget to create this creative experience? So I just want to caveat before we continue on, just when you're being creative and you're brainstorming, like let all of the ideas come in. That's how creativity works. We are going to talk about budget and how to make all of this come together in just a little bit. But continuing down this creative path, how should brands think about designing experience that align with their product, that align with their message or a launch?
Um, I would say don't necessarily lead with sales, right? Like lead with kind of like the feeling or the experience.
Mhm.
Um, because you want to show that the product has value, right? It's not just about, okay, so here's all the benefits of, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's if you use this product, you have our brand behind you, right? And our brand, and we want you to feel like you're a part, like a belong. People want to belong, especially in the days of these days of social media and everything, right? They want to feel like they understand and they're part of your brand story.
yeah,
So I really think that that's key.
yeah,
And then also, right, like how does your product fit into that person's life, right? Or the real world, right? Like when they go back home, right? How are they going to continue to use their product? And how will they continue that connection with your brand when they're not right in front of you at the trade show?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's those memorable moments that connect with their everyday life. Yeah, and I'm sure there's lots of, like, I'm getting ideas now. I don't even have a brand that I'm trying to get come up with, but you're coming with so many good ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do this. Okay, so budget. This is the subject that we all know we have to talk about it. So let's talk about getting more from your event budget, because obviously brand marketers, they have a high hurdle. They have to deliver ROI, and often they're being asked to do this with flat or shrinking budgets. Like every year, the hurdle is higher, but the budget is tighter, right? So, what are you seeing sponsors do to maximize their investment in, I would say, like in your conference, or even any notes that you have on that you've seen, trends that you've seen?
Yeah, I actually have a really and a brand in mind that
Mhm.
is a sponsor with us every year. So every year because we realize they're not only exhibiting and sponsoring at our event, right? They're
Mhm.
doing it at multiple events throughout the year. So every year they create a specific theme that they're going to use throughout the year, right? Their booth is that theme, right? Or and their marketing is that theme. And what they do is they don't just sponsor the same thing with us every year. And they rarely sponsor any signage, usually because again, signage is great, right? If you want your brand everywhere, signage is great. But it doesn't necessarily, help activate, right? It doesn't activate your message. And there's no, it's hard to get clear defined ROI, right, from a banner, right? Like
Yep.
you can say, okay, 20,000 people walked under this banner, right? But did they see
Yeah.
it? Did they read it? Did they interact with your brand after? You don't know, right?
Right.
Whereas in activation, you will know because there are ways, that we track who actually came to your activation and interacted. So anyway, so this one sponsor, what they do is they just do one activation every year that they sponsor, and it's something that aligns with their brand. So, for example, this year their year-round, theme and brand was around music. So they sponsored our DJ booth. Um, and the year before it was more like what you do, like what you do in your practice every day. And so they sponsored an activation that we do. I don't know if you guys know what gibbets are, but so in the veterinary world, a lot of people wear Crocs, and there's little
Okay.
charms that go in the holes on the
Oh,
Crocs, and they're
yeah.
called, they're called gibbets. And
Okay.
so anyway, so they sponsored that. So every year they pick something that we already offer, right? So it kind of keeps their costs down because they're not creating their whole our own thing, but that most
Okay.
aligns with what their annual theme is.
Nice.
So, and I think they're very intentional about that. They're not right. Okay, let's just do what we did last year, sign us up. No, they're like, okay, what are we going to do this year? And what is Viticus Group offering that most aligns with that and can help us continue that message outside of our booth?
Absolutely. So they're essentially they're thinking beyond the booth to capture the year-round ROI because we know that like that number, that budget number pops, that expense pops from the investment in the booth or their sponsorship, but throughout the year they're capturing ROI from that. And so if we think about that and them going outside of the booth as well, how can brands get more value from an event beyond just the days on site?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, kind of like I kind of alluded to this earlier. You have to be intentional. You have to be year round.
Mhm.
So, the majority of it, I actually read this recently in a study. About 80% of attendees, when they sign up for a conference, they know that there's going to be at least one brand there that they want to interact with, right?
Okay.
They look at our exhibitor list and they look at our sponsor list. So having that pre-messaging is huge. And that's
Mhm.
something you can do on your own. But of course, we offer things, right? Emails and social posts and those type of things so you can interact with them. Like you need to get in their head before they get to the show floor so that they
Yeah.
know that they have to make time to stop by your booth and see your sales reps while they're there. And then of course the on-site messaging and then the follow-up. Another study that I read recently said 80% of leads from a trade show are not ever followed up on. I mean, that's insane to me because, right, like in a sense, that's why you're there, right? To get leads and to follow up on business. So that continual follow up. We actually at our show we give everyone a free lead scanner device with their booth, which a lot of conferences don't do that.
Yeah.
So you're getting all of those email addresses, all of those contacts right then. So there's no reason you can't follow up with them and continue that story. And one of the things I like to do is saying, hey, and a lot of our sponsors do is they come by our booth to get this, right? Or, they
Mhm.
maybe mail them something, redeem this at our booth beforehand, right? And then
Yeah.
after just continuing that story, I think that makes all the difference.
So it's the before the event, pre-booking meetings, having that messaging to go out during the event, good activation, after the event, follow up where you'll continue capturing that ROI as well.
Yeah, because on site, people are so overstimulated, right?
Yeah.
So you need to get into their brain when they're not as distracted before the event and after.
Absolutely. So we also we have a question here. We always hear of tightening budget. So to what extent are you measuring the ROI of brand activations? And there's a second part to this question. Have you identified cases where increased investment has demonstrably driven stronger engagement or commercial outcomes, which would inform higher budget allocation in future events. Let me know if you need me to read that again. It's a
Yeah,
mouthful question. Okay.
I'm looking at it. Hold
Okay,
on,
great.
let me reread the first part really quick. What
Yeah.
exactly measuring the ROI of brand activations? So I would say, so what our standard is, again, it's, ROI, right, is different to everyone. But
Yeah.
what we do as short organizers, with every activation that we offer lead, we do lead retrieval, right? We do, have so we always have someone stationed there. It's a temp who's stationed at the activation, and they scan every badge of every person that comes through the activation. And then we give that list to the sponsor. So that's what we do on our part as show organizers. And then, what the sponsors and brands do with that data, is up to them. Have you identified cases where increased investment has? Yes, I would definitely say that we have. What we do, especially with booth sizes, obviously, people change their booths, right? You want to maybe start at a 10 by 10. As you get bigger, as you grow, you might want to move on to an island booth. And we do track specifically, not only, the visitors to each booth, but we also track by booth size. Because obviously, maybe it's not obvious. The larger booth size you have, the more attendees you can engage with, right? Because right, if you have a 10 by 10, right, you probably don't want more than two sales reps in your booth. Right. And those two sales reps, can do, I usually say anywhere from five to seven interactions per hour. Right. So that's only going to give you maybe 14 interactions. Right. And so, whereas if you have an island booth, you can have, depending on the size, right, you could have 10, 20 sales reps, and they're all having the same conversations. And so we see a lot more traffic. Obviously, the larger the booth you have, the more traffic, the more leads you're going to get, the more meaningful conversations that your sales reps can have on site. I hope that answers the
Absolutely.
question.
That's helpful. We also have another question about they found that activations can drive more leads, but it can be quantity over quality. Obviously, you have people who are excited to come by, who might not be a good fit. So how do you get around that?
So I would say targeting your activation to the audience, again, the audience that you want. What is the quality that you want? So, for example, in our line of work, right, we have veterinarians, we have vet techs, which are kind of like the nurses of the vet world for those that aren't familiar. We have practice owners, practice managers, and we do have people that target their events, special events, and or activations just to those markets, specific markets, because depending on what they're looking for. And they can they can purchase, the full attendee list from us ahead of the event. And we do break it down by that. So they can specifically say, okay, this activation is just for vet techs, and they can even call it that in the name. You must have a vet tech badge, right, to enter. And they can email, reach out to those vet techs ahead of the event and market specifically to them. So I would
Absolutely.
just say work with your event organizer, know who the audience is you want to connect with, and work with them to design your activation specifically around that audience.
Absolutely. And I have one more question here. I know we're coming up on time soon. So I wanted to just ask a little bit more about WVC because it goes beyond the main conference. You have the regional events, and then you also have the year-round education program. So when we think about a holistic strategy, how should marketers think about expanding their event strategy beyond the main flagship conference?
Yeah. So I think, again, it's kind of about the journey of that, right? The relationship journey, right? So let's just say maybe the conference might be the first time that person has interacted with your brand. We're fortunate that we have these facilities where we do year-round veterinary training. And people can interact with us. Sponsors can interact with us year-round. They could put on a specific course at our facilities, or they could sponsor a course that we're already doing. Of course, we offer some branding. So really, I think another thing is right that we offer, because our conference is mainly focused on education. So one of the ways that we offer brands to interact with the attendees is thought leadership. So and having, I think when an attendee sees a brand as a thought leader, right? Oh, they are experts in this subject or that subject, right? They're when they have a potential issue, right, or case come up in the future that focuses on that, that's what they're going to think of. Oh, they had a session, they led a session on this, like they're the ones that really know. Let me talk to my rep and see maybe right what they might offer in the way of that. And that's something that we offer year round, is that thought leadership, right here at our facilities. And then I know, and we have 2 conferences, so
Yeah.
a little bit more of that year round. And I think a lot of organizations have that, right? Whether they have multiple conferences throughout the year or whatnot, there are ways to continue that relationship with the attendees year round.
Absolutely. I know we touched on a lot of things today, obviously mostly about getting creative, talking about the ROI. Is there anything that maybe we didn't cover that you want to include?
Um, I would say continuity is big.
Mhm.
You know, we talked about, keeping your brand present and top of mind year round, but having a continuous message, right, that makes sense, that people can relate to, right? And when they think of your brand, they can think of that specific, feeling or message that you have. I know that's big for me, when I think of brands that I interact with, right? And when they continue the journey, right? Like an email, hey, remember that session that we put on at this, and how it might have made you feel, and now you can do this. Or maybe it's just a reminder, right? Like, hey, it
Mhm.
was great seeing you, like, remember when we did all this together, it was so fun. And just right, it's really a relationship. Like sales,
Yeah.
as everyone knows, is a relationship business, so
Mhm.
making people feel that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your insight today. This was such a practical and honest look at what actually moves the needles for sponsors. And if we take a step back, a few key themes stand out. First, successful event marketing today is about engagement, not just presence. So the brands that stand out are creating meaningful experiences that connect with attendees. Second, many of the most effective sponsorship strategies extend beyond the show floor, whether that's education, networking, community engagement, providing that feeling. And third, as budgets continue to tighten, the marketers who succeed are those who focus their event investments where the right audience is already gathering. So if today's conversation got you thinking about your own event strategy, Vendalux can help you put it into practice. Visit vendalux.com to get insights on your next event. You can even create a free account to start exploring. We'll also share with you more information on Sarah's contact information as well if you'd like to learn more about the Western Veterinary Conference. Thank you once again for joining us today, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.
Thanks, Letitia. Thanks, everyone.